So I was going to start out with the philosophy of big. So with me, I don't like big businesses. I don't know how you feel about that
Yeah,
in
I'm
general.
also fairly anti-large corporation. Yeah.
Right. Because when they have too much power in few hands, there's no competition, nothing works well. And that is the same philosophy I have with business, with government. I don't believe that one big government works well with anything. I think competition makes things work better. That's why the 50 states that we have work well instead of having one conglomerate. That's why one healthcare system doesn't work, because there are a lot of people who actually make money off these big government projects that don't really care, just like the business people don't care about what the end result is. And my basis is based on reality. And I'll give you one if you don't mind, Carl. I'm in the building material business, and there is the Department of Homeless. And the Department of Homeless for the last, I don't know what years, I know them for years and years and years. What they do is they supposedly help the homeless in New York City. Well, if you walk in New York City, it's not any better. And they're getting billions and billions of dollars. Now, in my area of business, I've seen them buy nice office equipment for the president of the Department of Homeless. And I'm going to get too personal, but I've seen a lot of administrators doing very well. And they don't have a reason to cure the Department of Homeless. They don't have a reason to cure homeless, because if they did, they wouldn't have jobs. So big government, just like big business, doesn't work. I'd like to see what your point of that is.
Yeah, so I agreed with the first part of your objection to big business when you said you don't want too much power in the hands of a few. And I agree with that, but that is where I think democratizing institutions makes a lot of sense. And that's why I think that the government certainly is not as democratic as I would like it to be. It's, things like the institutions like the Senate are very undemocratic. But I do think that it is more democratic than what you have with a big corporation. And so I think that when you have our healthcare system, it's not a matter of whether or not like, oh, are we going to have this like perfect free market? I mean, I think that largely that's just not something that can really exist. But what we do have with the healthcare system in this country is a bunch of small private institutions. I mean, they're actually large private institutions, but there's not that many of them that get to dictate whether or not people get healthcare. I would rather see that in the hands of a democratized institution like the government, where the healthcare is made a public good rather than a profit-making industry.
Now, you say a public good, but as I say back to what I said before, these government agencies, sometimes, as any person who works and who has this power. See, I don't trust politicians, just like the reason I trust business is because I own a business. I screw up. You know what happens? My customers go down the street. If business screws up, you can't go anywhere else. You're stuck there. So when you look at when you look at governments running things, there's no reason to run it well. Of course, if you look at the motor vehicles department, a perfect example, if you ever go there, I'm sure you do once in a while, see they don't run it in a very effective way because they don't have to. There's no incentives. There's nobody who's accountable. And what happens once in a while, there's an election, somebody switches around. But generally, government does not run things effectively. They waste a lot of money. And the reason I am who I am the way it is, and you find the strange, is I really care about poor people and people, and I really want to see them uplifted. Democrats make me a lot of money. I'm a conservative. I do much better with Democrats financially than Republicans, honestly. They help me out so much more. I get much more government projects, much more stuff going my way. It works out very well. There's enough ways to, manipulate the system, to be honest with you, where I don't have to worry about taxes like crazy. And if you're really rich and they screw up with you too much, you know what you do? You go and you leave. People leave from New York to Florida. They leave from New York. They leave from the United States to another country if they need to. They don't stay. So the idea is that it can't work because of the idea of being big and controlled by just a few versus competition that makes things more effective.
So I think that, so I am not opposed to all markets. I think that markets do have a place in some sectors. Now, I think that they should be regulated markets, but I do think that markets have a place. But I think you run into a problem with healthcare because you kind of alluded to it. You're like, well, with the business, you can just decide, I'm going to take my business somewhere else. That's very difficult to do with healthcare. It's that someone can't really decide, well, I just won't take my insulin. I just, you need it to survive. So if you break your leg and you need to go to the hospital, it's not like, well, I'll just drive to the hospital, 50 miles away. It's like, I know I need to be treated right here. You don't have that same flexibility with your demand that you do with other services, like with a video game, for example. And so I think it's due to that lack of flexibility that we see a substantial amount of price gouging happening in the healthcare sector. That's why we see that with pharmaceutical drugs, for example. People pay way more for pharmaceutical drugs in this country than they do in other developed nations. And we can
Now,
see that they,
I'm
or
sorry,
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt that. Now, we talk about medicines. We have some
Yeah.
of the most cutting edge technical medicines in the world. There's other ways to solve problems like this, but the reason we have that is the profit incentive. Without that incentive, I'm not developing the medicines. I'm not
I
investing in this. The reason that all the new developments and new technology, new ideas come out is because people at the end of the game, I can make a lot of money. And there's a
yeah,
lot of products that don't make it a marketplace, but they're willing to take this gamble, this risk that they're going to do because in the end, they think there's going to be a nice payoff at the end. That's the
Yeah, so
difference. And
I'm
you get,
I'm gonna push. I'm gonna have to push back on that really
sure.
hard because an enormous amount of pharmaceuticals specifically use publicly funded research. A lot of this because R&D is a very long and often expensive process.
Mhm.
A lot of pharmaceutical companies don't want to go into that process. They would rather just take what is the discoveries that come from the public sector, buy them up, patent them, and then say, okay, well, we just get to keep all the profits. And so, while I do think that there are cutting edge drugs, we can see for insulin, just for example, insulin already exists. It is a fraction of the cost in Canada, where they have a universal healthcare system. And so it's not just a matter of innovation. I don't think you stifle innovation by continuing to fund things through the public sector like we already do. I think it was from 2010 to 2016. Every single new drug that was approved by the FDA that went to market used publicly funded research. Now, maybe you can get into how much of this is used, how much publicly funded research is used. That's kind of hard to quantify because the trial and error process is a big part of that. And so something could be error for a really long time. And then as soon as it's successful, then that's when the pharmaceutical company comes and buys it up. And so I think it is safe to say, though, that a lot of this innovation is funded publicly. It wouldn't necessarily go away if we move away from some of these profit incentives.
What
Yeah,
I was what I was going to say, another part about that whole thing is that a lot of times the cost that a business incurs then goes back and they put it into the product cost. And so when we talk about, we can keep going about pharmaceuticals, but the idea they have to go through this whole thing with FDA, they have to go through this and they have to do this. So many loops they have to go through to get it passed makes the cost much more money. Now there are ways I would say that you can alleviate without this whole government involvement. The way you do it is you let people have, let's say, instead of the patent being like 5 years, like you change the patent to be patents like say 6 years or 7 years, you have to have a lower margin of profit. You have to agree to that. Will increase your patent for a longer period of time. So the initial cost will be less, and they'll have the patent longer. So the cost of the product, they'll make it less money when it comes out, and that at the same time they feel protected because the patent's longer. So there's different ways, there's different maneuvers that you can do without government getting involved. Because again, I know people like who, if we're going to go back, I don't want to go too much of healthcare because there's a lot more things I want to talk to you about today.
yeah,
But
of course.
when we talk about healthcare itself, the idea is that people who will work their life to become doctors or get involved in any medical industry, a lot of things to do, and then you do get rid of their incentive. You tell them you're not going to get, you only get paid this amount of money, you get only this thing. They stop doing it, and you have less avenues to get the help you need. Because again, everybody wants to make money or something on it. That's why all these socialist policies generally don't work so well because a lot of people don't have no reason to. That's why we have a lot of people not working now because they're making more money not working than when they work. So when you gave them that incentive to sit home and do nothing, a lot of them people sat home because it was like I could just do this and not work, and it was bad for them too. So
There's a lot to address there, and we did go down the rabbit hole a little bit with pharmaceuticals. So maybe we'll tie it back into government and just healthcare more broadly. But I just want to address something really fast. The expanded unemployment benefits have been over for 2 months now. The federal expanded unemployment benefits have been over for 2 months, yet we
right.
didn't see an enormous number of people return to the marketplace. And I think that this is because it's not just unemployment. That wasn't the only reason why people are staying home. Maybe you can say that some people, that's why they're staying home, but a large number of people, they stayed home because of COVID. They stayed home because of they wouldn't be offered enough like for the wages of what job they would be going towards. So I don't think you can just boil it down to unemployment benefits. I mean, we've always had unemployment benefits in this country. And if it's the expanded benefits, those have been over for 2 months now.
Carl, let me give you a quick example of something. When I was growing up, they put me in a special ed class. I'm now 50 years old or so. So when I had that label of being a special ed class, it stays with me today. When you're on a welfare benefit and you're on something like that, and you're sitting home, eventually it wears you down. You stop not feeling great about yourself. To me, anybody who receives any benefits should have to do some type of work. I don't care if it's going to college. I don't care if it's doing something. Getting money for nothing is bad for the person. It's not just bad for the whole thing. It's bad for the person itself. And we demoralize people by just giving them money for nothing, and they don't feel like they don't feel well about it. When I go to work, the reason I go to work now more than anything else is I care about my customers and I care about doing a good job what I'm doing. And much as I'm not trying to build myself up, but when you get to be a professional, when it comes easy, it's a much more feeling. And so when you demoralize people by just giving them money for nothing, they don't feel good and they feel like
Oh,
nothing.
see,
And that hurts them. And I mean, that's why that's the thing that hurts them more than you can imagine.
I couldn't disagree with that sentiment more. What demoralizes people when they're on welfare is the enormous number of people that say, you don't deserve this. You don't deserve these basic necessities of life. That is what demoralizes people. People like the idea that someone should feel like, oh, I don't like deserve to be eating right now. I don't deserve to have a roof over my head. That I think that's silly. These are basic things that should be just guaranteed to you by nature of being a person. It's not some sort of stigma about receiving benefits that people feel bad about. It is the societal stigma that we put on people. And I think one of the clearest measures of this is that in other nations where they don't have so much stigma surrounding welfare benefits, people don't feel demoralized when they receive public assistance because that's not like a thing. And that's why you see in just to clarify that, like what I'm referring to specifically, and Denmark, for example, they have much higher economic mobility in this country, and they don't have the stigma that we have in this country around accepting welfare benefits because they recognize, no, if people are going through hard times, they're going to be helped out. People, you deserve to survive just because you're a human. You shouldn't starve just because you've lost your job, you've come on hard times. And also what it does though, is it disincentivizes entrepreneurship. Why are people going to go and take a risk if they know that they're going to end up with nothing if they fail? But if people know that, like,
I don't want to go.
wait,
Sorry,
just to finish that.
Yeah, go. I'm sorry.
All right, yeah. Just to finish that point though, if you know that I can go and try and start a business and you won't end up on the streets starving if you fail, you're more likely to go take that risk.
All right. So listen, I don't think we need to go to extremes. I'm not saying we should cut off welfare totally. I'm not saying we should do any of that stuff. I never said that at all. What I'm saying is when you have make it so easy for people, it's not easy for them. It's not good for them. If you give them, I wouldn't say give them, of course, we don't want anybody starving in the street. We don't want, but if you told a person, listen, we're going to give you some monies, but what we'd like you to do is go to get a college education, or we want you to take this class, or we want you to work at this place a few hours a day, or they feel a lot better sitting home. I'm telling you what I've seen in my life, sitting home and feeling sorry for yourself and just taking money from the government is not good for people and doesn't help them. It doesn't help them. And that's why I
say
care.
That you say that you don't want the extremes, but when you put those stipulations on people to receive assistance, well, you brought up the homelessness crisis. One of the biggest reasons why we have such a big homeless crisis in this country is that the way that we try to address it often isn't very good. So for example, for someone to go to a shelter, they'll say, oh, well, you can't be on drugs if you're going to a shelter. You have to completely be clean before you can come into the shelter.
Stupid.
Well, it's
That's
really
stupid.
difficult. Yeah, exactly.
That's stupid.
But that's what you were making the case for. You're like, well, they should have to do something to get this assistance.
Of course, of course they should. But again, that's an example. If someone was on drugs, they'd have to be in a drug rehab center. I mean, they have to get themselves better. We want them to get better. The reason we have a homelessness crisis is because government closed these places where helping people out that have mental health issues, and we let them wander around the street. We're not helping them get better. We let them just. There should be a quote, a crime to be on the street. And if it was a crime to be on the street, then they have to be put in places where they get education and get training and get better and get their life in order, because they're dying on the street. People are dying of drugs and dying, not getting the proper mental care, and they're dying in the street because they don't have families that care and don't know about it, what's going on. It's a total mess. And that's the real reason. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I care so much about seeing, I mean, it's horrible. You have people that we just don't do. We just let them go out and die, basically. And yes, we need to have strong, incentives to get them back into the system and get them better.
But I think what the point I was making more is just the idea that, like, when you have these like stipulations that you have to meet to get, for example, just a place to live, a shelter, then you're going to leave people on the street. And when you do that, you make it harder for those people to end up re-entering society.
You know what I would do? Sorry, Carl.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to. This is what I would do, just so you know, because we live in a capitalist society. I would start out, you get the place, you get a room that basic, very, very basic food. But as you're going to get the drug treatment, as you're getting the mental health treatment, as you're going to get education or job training treatment, you get little things to build yourself up. You start realizing by doing good things and trying to get more involved and getting a job, you get more in your room. Your room is empty and you build up, maybe there's a store in the place. So again, it's the same idea. You can get the basics, you can get that same thing to survive. But if you want to move ahead in life, you have to commit yourself to more. And that's basically what it is to anything. It's like in any business. You can go out, you could start at a job and you're just going to sweep the floor and sweep the floor. It's fine. That's great. That's what you're going to do. But don't expect to be manager and president of the company. The guy that then puts the stuff on the shelf and does other stuff, they move up the ladder. It's the same thing there. If you take more incentives, you move up and it helps them get better as a whole. They can have the basics, the very basics, but don't giving them more than that is not helping them.
Well, I don't think we're in any danger of giving people too much. I mean, we brought up the homeless crisis. There are so many people that don't even have the basic that is a shelter, a place to sleep at night. Right. Thousands of Americans in the wealthiest nation to ever exist, LA, you can bring up LA specifically, in one of the wealthiest areas in the entire world. You have people that live in these little mansions, and then just a couple blocks on the street, you have people living on the streets. It's a broken system. And I mean, you alluded to living in a capitalist society before, but I mean, those are the ramifications of having a system where, okay, if you succeed, you get to live in a nice place. And if you fail, you live on the street. I mean, that is the ramification.
Well, again, and I wouldn't, again, if I would make it, it's illegal to sleep on the street, anybody sleep on the street, to urinate in the street, to defecate in the street. And by that, you have to go to these places to stay and get better and get help and so forth, whether it's a farm, whether it's an apartment, and then we get them better and make them move on with their life. But we keep going on that. I got another one for you. Are you ready?
No, of course. Yeah,
what I'm really curious about is what you think caused this whole inflationary cycle and the supply chain problems. And then I'll give you my answer.
No. Okay. This is a fun one to get into. Well, so I think one of the biggest things to look at is that the biggest area where we're seeing inflation right now is within the energy sector. And it's very clearly not the result of government spending. It's the result of, I mean, if we talk about oil prices specifically, demand for oil plummeted during the pandemic because people weren't traveling as much. People weren't using oil. Production was way down. And so as a result, OPEC was having problems storing all the oil that they weren't being able to get out there. And so they basically had an unprecedented drawback of the amount of oil they're producing. And so now that demand is back up, it's actually even higher than it was before the pandemic. It's making oil prices go through the roof. And as a result, we're seeing gas prices are way up. That's just one example, though, of the inflation we're seeing being pretty directly correlated to, or not correlated, caused by the pandemic. And I'm sure there's more to get into from there, but I'd love to hear your response to the energy sector specifically.
Well, with energy, a couple things happen. First of all, you demonize people and demonize companies and demonize business as a whole. It's not going to make them want to do a lot of work when you cut down pipelines. And you overregulate.
Who's you?
The government, not you.
Oh,
personally.
okay.
You're very nice. You don't have that power.
I know. I was just kidding. I was like, did I do that? I was like, I didn't know.
But when you close pipelines and you make everything, you make it much harder to go out and get the resources from different areas, which we started doing, and you make the businesses plan in the future. So when they know that a government is going to be very harmful to the industry, they cut back. And they don't have the incentive to do it. So they stop doing it when it comes to that. Now, I'm in the building material business. That's where I come from. So there's been an unbelievable amount of shortages in every area. And what happens, again, these mandates that they put into effect, for example, I took the vaccine right away. That's my decision as an individual that I thought was best, not just for me, but I knew what was going to happen, honestly. And I knew I have an older father. So that's why I did it. But everyone has the right, I believe, to do what they think is right for their own body. My own personal opinion. And when you have a certain amount of people that refuse to take that takes people off your labor force. That's one. And getting the work done with less people on your labor force is much harder, number one. Number two, again, back to these disincentives, when you are going to increase regulations and you're going to increase taxes, and you're going to put this, the businesses start to say, you know what, I don't really have to push so hard. I don't really feel like doing this type of work. And then when you take truckings, certain people you say that the truckers have to be 21 years old to drive a truck. Now you throw a whole bunch of people that are 18 to 21 to drive the truck. Now the 18 years old want to do the job that can serve in the military and serve in their country and do all this stuff. They can't drive a truck because the unions tell them they can't drive a truck. That also lowers the amount of people delivering goods. Less people delivering goods, costs go up. Then you have the issue of the I don't have to my time. of the people that are working, again, even the shipping people, the same idea, like less people doing because of the mandates, they don't want to work, they don't want to be forced to be in that business to have a mandate on them. And even if you didn't officially make the mandate officially, they feel such disincentive, they don't feel like showing up to work. So this is creating the environment that is raising inflation, that is causing supply chain to be much more problematic, and it won't stop. Oh, and most importantly of all this, and this is just, I don't want to be insult anyone, so I won't say that part of it. But when the government spends too much money, whether it's in Venezuela, it's in Cuba, it's in any country in the world, there's less money comes less, and that causes the inflation to go up. And again, that's what's one of the major reasons that we have a problem right now. Government can only, it just keeps, and that's just history. And I can give you.
I completely disagree, and I think that, like, I mean, we
How
talked
about
about
somewhat is great? How about somewhat?
Well, I mean, I don't.
How about 80? I'm just joking.
No. I think that no. Oh yeah, completely. Yeah, no, maybe like 80%. Yeah, no.
Okay.
But just on the energy point specifically, I thought you made an interesting point. You said it has to do with like demonization of like the oil industry or fossil fuels. But if that were the case, I think it's at the very least coincidental that the rising prices in oil are directly the result of OPEC. And this was like not a secret. They said we are going to scale back production because demand is so low because of the pandemic. Like this is what they said.
I don't mean to interrupt. I apologize for that, but I know you don't like the former president, but when the former president was president, our country was energy efficient. We were exporting oil and gas. We were doing that. You got rid of the natural gas cycle we had.
I have to cut in on that one. I mean, we were still importing giant amounts of oil under Donald Trump.
We'll have to find that out later on. But we were actually at that point exporting. I don't know what the Google search.
But that's the thing though, is that like while oil was created domestically, not created, but you know what I mean, extracted domestically,
right?
It was exported, but we were still consuming imported oil. Like this, like what you're referring to is the energy independence. And so what that means, like that term just means that you were consuming less than you were producing. But the thing is that our oil industry is largely privatized. You know what I mean? We don't have like a nationalized oil industry like they have in like Norway, for example. And so when it's privatized, when they extract the oil, they can do what they want with it. And a lot of these companies put it on the global market. You know what I mean? They just put it out there. And so just because we're exporting oil doesn't mean that we weren't still dependent on OPEC. I mean, we can just look at I can pull up the numbers if we want. We were still consuming pretty sizable portions of oil that was produced by OPEC. And so because also the problem with this logic is in 2020 is when we started to see energy prices start to go back up. Like the correct word would be like the lowest point was in May of 2020, and then they started to rise. And so if this was the result of just Biden coming into office, why were we seeing energy prices already going back up?
All right, let's break this up into pieces, okay? So number one, you don't think government spending increases inflation?
So I mean, we're talking about whatchamacallit,
oil,
energy specifically, but no, government spending doesn't inherently
increase inflation,
create inflation.
I just want to understand that, okay? And you don't believe that mandates do not cause some people to quit their jobs, so there's less people working?
They can theoretically, but I mean, as of right now, there is no. As of right now, there is no federal mask mandate, and the federal vaccine mandate hasn't actually been implemented yet.
You don't think people have left their job because they feel threatened by this whole thing right now?
Yeah, but I think it's important to clarify what you mean by mandates. You mean like a mandate that like just a vaccine like a workplace? No, but like that a workplace has decided to impose on itself?
No, based on the government coming down on them, they figure it's going to happen, so they do it instead.
Well, if they think that it will eventually happen, that's a different thing. And that's why we're actually seeing that some employers, because for example, I'm sure you're referring to the mandate proposed by Joe Biden.
Yes.
The one proposed by Biden was vaccine or weekly negative COVID test. Workers had that option.
Yeah, but and the workers had to pay for that COVID vaccine test. They had to pay no one. Yes.
They're actually free. They're free places where you can get a test. But the important thing though is what I'm trying to clarify is that there are corporations that said, all right, but we are going to make it more strict. We are going to do more strict than what Biden is proposing. So for example, Fox News, while that might be what Biden is proposing, Fox News's requirement is you have to take you either get vaccinated or a daily negative COVID test. And so they have a more strict. So there are companies that have decided to go more strict than what is being talked about at the federal level. And now I suppose you can say that in certain ways that could potentially have a lessening effect on production, but I mean, not in the energy sector. Like that's not what we're seeing, and that is the biggest area where we're seeing. I mean, we can look at the CPI.
No,
It's energy is where the biggest rising costs are.
well, there's food shortages, there's energy being taken because of
Food is
import.
the second largest,
I
but
mean,
there's also,
I mean, people are
look,
getting, I mean, it's, this whole thing is hurting poor people. Again, in me, I can, I don't want to say I'm the thing, but I can afford to get my chicken. It's okay. I'll be, if it goes to whatever, if I'll go vegetarian, whatever. By the way, I'm much more green than most of my liberal friends, but I'll tell you about that later on. The truth of the matter is I can do well. I can do okay with it. I don't care. I care about that lady down in the Midwest who's working 2 shifts at her job just to pay for filling a tank of gas because she can't afford a Tesla, because she can't afford an electric car. So she has to keep paying those bills on the gas. And then she has to go to the grocery store in the middle of the night to try to get some chicken on the meal. And there's no turkey for Thanksgiving. She'll get a turkey leg because there's no turkeys left to have it because the shortage is going on. That's what I worry about. Me,
but we
I'm
have
fine.
to.
I'm fine with
But we
this.
have to address. No. I also agree. I think inflation is a really big problem right now. I'm not denying that there's inflation. I think there's a lot of inflation. But I
And
think the question is why
shortages.
though? Is why? Well, yeah, inflation and then a lot of the. I mean, shortages cause inflation. You know what I mean? Because when there's less of a good, it's going to cost more, so that's going to cause rising prices, and so that's going to
Correct.
lead to
Supply and
inflation.
demand. Right.
Yeah. And so I think that the big question then becomes why. And so I would like to hear, why do you think that the government spending specifically has led to why aren't we seeing it across the board? If it was government spending, it would imply that we would see pretty much across the board there'd be inflation. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing very specific areas having much more inflation. The two biggest are food and energy. Why are those two being hit so hard if it was just government spending?
Well, it's travels. I mean, it first started, to be honest with you, it started with things like the mask and comes with plexiglass and it travels to different industries. I've seen it with plywood shortages like crazy. It's been all over the place. And so one area gets a little bit of break because, like again, supply and demand type thing. So when there's enough of demand for something, all the factories start building things up to make up for the supply. So it travels, and it's going to keep traveling depending on what the costs are. If the costs go up so much, more people who are business people will get in the industry, bring out more goods, and the price should go down. So, but that it's not going to stay in one area. Right now, it's going to keep moving on. Gas is going to keep going up because, again, all the burdens they're putting on the gas companies and all the regulations and closing down the pipelines and all these things that make it harder to get the stuff out of the ground is making it much more expensive. There's less,
But
there's
but
less
if, but
supply.
if that were
There's
why though,
less
why did
demand.
it start already though?
Well, it could always start a little bit, but it's going up like crazy. This is what we're talking about going. It's going up a little bit now. It's going insane, and it's not going to stop. We're going to have a conversation 2 years from now, and it's going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up because government's spending too much money. When government spends money, money doesn't mean anything. What's going to happen is everybody involved in Bitcoin, all these other stuff, gold and silver, and all that stuff. They're going to keep making money because that's what happens when inflation standardly goes up.
Well,
So,
I think that it's important to recognize that, like, I don't know, it's not just that the government is spending. It has to do, like, I mean, with bottleneck, for example, there's a shortage of shipping containers right now. That's making it more expensive to transport things. That doesn't have anything to do with government spending. There's been a pretty severe drought hitting both parts of America and then as well as parts of Latin America. This is making it harder to grow things like corn. And when it's really hard to grow things like corn, when cows, chicken, and pigs eat corn, it makes it more expensive to consume those things. And like that's why we're seeing like beef is more expensive right now, chicken is more expensive right now. This is not the cause by government spending though. And just at like a really basic level, when you stop production for a year basically in 2020, which is what we did because of COVID, that's going to lead to shortages. There's going to be less because
do you think that was a good idea to do that?
I think that we should have been more careful with the way we did the lockdowns. And I think that there were some businesses that were like closed when like big businesses were allowed to stay open. I disagreed with the way that we did that. And I think that
Wow,
people were.
that's great. That's our first big agreement. Knock that down. No, it really
No.
is. There's again, big business getting their way, making money, putting out small businesses because they were allowed to exist, and small businesses that only unless they had the emergency supplies like we did were most had to be closed. And we killed so many entrepreneurs and people with ideas, and eventually we got people so trapped. And government loved it. Business and government got together like never before and became a big conglomerate working together to. I mean, it's just like they got so much power, and the power was so great. And that's the worst thing at all. I mean, I hope if they get anything out of this conversation more than anything else we agree on, is people in politics and business, if they work together like that, they become into getting the power and the money together, and they need to separate that. We don't need them as one alliance. We don't need the newspapers working with the government. We don't need we need everybody almost to fight each other, not fight each other, but have a little competition between it. Right now, what happened is when that happened, only the big businesses and the big government work together hand in hand. And that was a very bad thing to say.
I think that I'm glad we agree on that. Yeah, I don't like to see the synthesis that we have between big business and big government. But I actually wanted to, so I looked it up because it sounded like there was some disagreement on this. So in 2020, net imports of crude oil in the United States were 2.7 million barrels per day. So we were still very dependent on. This is in 2020. So it's just simply not the case that like we were like
You're killing the natural gas industry. It's basically hitting the natural gas industry. That's a big part of it. You're killing the coal industry. You're killing all these things. You're making it much harder. That's all energy sources.
Wait. So we have to address this.
New regulations.
Because you said that Trump made it so we weren't dependent on like other countries for oil.
I'm not
2.7 million barrels per day is we're very dependent on those other. This is imports. That's net imports.
I'm just saying that. But I understand. But we were getting oil and natural gas and coal and all the other items, we were getting it out of our own resources. The regulations were a lot lighter, so business had the opportunity to invest in certain areas to get that. Now, I'm a business. Let's say you're you want to make money in the business. Okay, you're a smart man, and you know that Biden comes to power. You're like, you know what? I'm not gonna work into getting a new, look for natural gas in North Dakota. He's gonna put more regulations on me. It's gonna be so hard. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna get involved. Coal industry. Forget about that. Now, as I was saying before, I am much more green than your friend Al Gore, than any of these people. I have solar. I just so you know this. I have a solar panels, generator, two electric cars. Okay, I don't have one house. And if you want to look at any of these people that went to that quote green environmental thing, they had a bunch of limousines coming down there, special private planes. They have, most of them have like 3 to 4 houses. Even I guess your friend Bernie Sanders, they all have their carbon footprint is much bigger than this right-wing conservative guy you're speaking to right now. And the reason I'm doing it is not because I'm such a nice guy, although I like to be a nice guy. The reason I'm doing it is to save money, also because gas I knew was going up. So it was actually a smart investment to do that. But with this whole thing about all these people they're so into making the world green, and they are the biggest hypocrites in the world. The biggest.
Well, so this is actually, I think that there's some really interesting stuff, and I think one of the most important things that you pointed out is just the idea that it does seem that you somewhat do think that carbon emissions are something to pay attention to. And I think an important thing to remember is that hypocrisy.
Sorry. No.
Oh no.
I'm just saying. Listen, I'm just saying that if I do it because it saves me money, honestly, and I have no reason not to. There's no negative to me. I like doing it, whatever. But the point of the matter is, if it was like important, like I'm religious, so I go to Shabbos, I do Shabbos every Saturday, I would do it. So that's my thing. So if you believe in this, if you really believe in this, have one house, have one car that's electric car. Do not go on your own private planes to go to these special conferences. Don't live that life, and don't tell me you believe in this, because if it's good for you, it's good for somebody else.
So let's address this. I mean, so hypocrisy, as you're using it right here, is a bit of a logical fallacy. It is not like just saying, oh, somebody isn't living by this argument. That does not mean that the argument is wrong. Like saying that climate change is a problem, if you're saying, well, this person isn't doing enough to combat climate change, that doesn't address the idea of whether or not climate change is an issue, something that we need to be concerned about. And
my question is very simple. I believe in, I guess I'm a man of faith my own way. So I go to services every Shabbos. Okay, that's what I believe in. Okay, that's my thing. Now, if I am a person that believes this is a major thing that's happening in the world, then shouldn't I be the one saying, I need to have an electric car. I need to go on a thing. How can you have 3 or 4 houses? It doesn't make any sense.
And that's why I want to address it. That's why I want to address it. So you can have a doctor, for example, and a doctor might say you should eat healthier, but maybe they themselves don't eat healthy. They don't drink enough water. Maybe they eat too much fast food. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat healthier. That just means the doctor should also take their own advice. But and so that's kind of what you're doing right here, is you're saying, well, these people, and you mentioned Bernie Sanders before. I promise you, Bernie Sanders was not invited to the COP26 summit. It was a very much frankly, I think you see a lot of corrupt business leaders, governmental leaders, just blowing smoke up there. That's not, it's
Mhm.
not a legitimate thing. But that's
Oh,
the
good.
thing though. So saying that there are people that are not living by these values doesn't address whether or not these values are something we ought to live by. And so just like if a doctor, even if they don't eat well, says eat good, that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat good just because the doctor isn't taking his own advice. And I would apply that same logic to climate change. There are a lot of governments that say that say we should do something about climate change that aren't actually doing enough. Well, that means that they should also be doing it though. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do
But
anything.
all right, but the
And so
point, whether you believe in it, the most important part of it, the most important about it, it's not the United States on this issue. It's China and India. If China and India
it's not
don't
actually
do,
we emit more than
they have a
India
billion,
does.
they have a billion people. If they don't do
They
anything,
do.
it's a waste of time. 2 billion people, it's a waste of us. We're the only ones suffering in it. If you can't convince China and India to do anything, I hate to say it, it's just putting us in a bind. If you believe in it, you have to, if you're gonna do anything, they have to be part of the team, and
This
that's
that,
it.
I mean, you're
And
not
otherwise
wrong.
it's a waste of, otherwise you're just penalizing yourself. So, unless they somehow come to some agreement with it, then it doesn't make sense.
But this is also I think an excellent point is that yes, it like the dealing with climate change needs to be done on a global basis. But the reality is that in terms of all the countries in the world, the US is the second biggest emitter. We emit more than other countries. The only country ahead of us is China. We are also arguably the most powerful country in the world. We have a substantial amount of leverage and ability to persuade other countries to go along with what we're doing.
I
So
think
yes,
right.
I
I
think
think I think right now nobody's listening to us at this point, but that's different. That's another conversation.
yeah, we can get into that maybe later. But my thing is that, yeah, I do think that the United States and China should be leading the way on this. And I think that they should be negotiating agreements. We should be negotiating treaties, getting both countries down to net zero emissions by 2050. And there's talks of this at the COP26 summit. John Kerry said that like him and one of China's officials
Yeah,
have like negotiated some deal. Who knows what it's going to turn into?
right.
But my point is to just circle back to what we were saying before. And when you talked about the cost of the things, the reality is that fossil fuel prices are going through the roof right now. Solar and solar, wind, all these other things. The inflation is a lot less in these other energy sources.
What was that the
And so,
purpose? Was that the purpose of this whole thing?
no, I don't think that was the purpose because like I said, we can keep tying it back to COVID though. Like that is why
No, but
demand was way down.
I
Like
know,
that's
I
why price.
know. But you understand what I said about business. As a business person, if you were in the gas and oil industry and President Trump is president or President Biden becomes president, you're going to invest in the future of gas and oil and all this stuff. If Trump's president, because you don't feel the regulations and all the things are going down. And if Biden is president, you're going to close that because you say, you know what? He's not going to help us with this industry. Matter of fact, he's going to go against us. He just today, he's doing he's investigating how they're raising the prices. I mean, they feel it, and that's the whole point. Is when one side feels it doesn't make sense to get involved in any of the energy things at this point with
But
the
like
presidents.
the surge in energy crisis is something energy costs is something we're seeing globally though. It's not just the US that's seeing a rise in prices. It is all over the world. Like oil prices just the international price of oil is up right now. It's not just like a US issue. So if it was just like, oh, Biden's in office now and he's making it harder on oil companies, then we wouldn't be seeing this all over the world. But we are. And that's because this isn't really the product of US domestic policy. This is the product of coming out of a global unprecedented pandemic.
Well, what didn't go up when Trump before the pandemic, it was pretty level. And let's go to one other topic before we go. How long you want to go for? But I was just curious about making sure that people who can vote. Oh, actually, I had two topics for you.
Okay, no,
One
no,
of
of course.
what
I'm
how long you
down. I
want?
like it. A big change in topic. I like it. What is it?
I am very much into immigrants. My father was an immigrant. My grandfather, my great grandfather was an immigrant, and I think it's great that people come to this country now legally. I really think it's great. And I hate to tell you this, but before President Trump, I didn't even think about illegal immigrants. I didn't even care at all about it. But he opened my eyes in many ways. First of all, he opened my eyes in the idea that drugs, fentanyl, when we don't watch the border, a lot of bad things come in the country that hurt people. Also, the idea of young women being used as sex slaves come through our country. When we don't watch our country, we have a horrible amount of people who abuse people going through our country. Also, the idea of COVID. When you don't have people vaccinated in this country legally, the COVID can go up because they're not getting vaccinations. We have people coming, for some reason, we are requiring people to have mandatory vaccines who live in this country, but people come illegally don't have to have vaccinations. And most importantly, we have no clue. There are a lot of great people, I'm sure, that come through illegally, but there are some really bad people, and anything that's bad people, whether they're going to be a gangster person, whether they're going to be a person that's a criminal in other elements. We don't know. They could be a terrorist. We have no clue. There's no reason why we can't protect our borders. I'd like to know
Okay.
why.
So you brought up 4 points there, and I want to hopefully address all four of those points. So the first thing you brought up is drugs coming across the southern border. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that the war on drugs here in the US has empowered cartels. These cartels would be crippled if we ended the war on drugs here in the US. This is just like how we saw the mafia gain substantial amounts of power during prohibition in this country when we made alcohol illegal. When you make something illegal, organized crime takes it as like, all right, we're going to handle this thing. And so I think if we ended the war on drugs, you would substantially disempower
So you think we should legalize heroin and fentanyl?
so I think that, so frankly, for you brought up heroin before. So opium actually did used to be legal in this country. Now what happens is that when you make things illegal, you put them on the black market and more dangerous iterations come about. So for example, there are also amphetamines, for example, that used to be more legal in this country. But then when you make it more illegal, then all of a sudden meth comes around and these dangerous iterations, because when it's not regulated, it's not being handled by the government, no eyes are on it, then all of a sudden you see really dangerous stuff come about. So for example, marijuana is very safe to consume, but when it's sold on the black market, it can be laced with something. All of a sudden it can become very dangerous. So I do think we should end the war on drugs. We should decriminalize all drugs and legalize certain drugs. So we should legalize marijuana, psilocybin mushrooms. I think you can make a case to legalize opium in certain forms, not in all forms.
Well, let's start with the easiest drug, since we talk about one drug. Let's talk about marijuana. Marijuana, the nice, safe drug everyone talks about. Do you know that many people that have mental health issues, they take it, they get really can have psychosis type effects? Do you also understand
When you say many, though, I mean you have to actually
under the people that have mental health. I
no,
don't have
you have to use the data on that.
it's
though.
fine.
But
I don't
it's
have that.
it's a tiny number of
Well,
people.
but even it's a few amount of people that are going to have psychosis because of it. It's not really great. Number two part about marijuana.
Wait, so we have to take this one at a time, though. So making it illegal isn't stopping those people from doing it. It's stopping them from doing it safely.
I personally, I'm just saying, I don't think marijuana should be illegal. I'm not even disagreeing with that. But I just to act like this, we have this thing that it's a great thing in this country now, became legal, and there are people that are going to die from it or go through mental health issues.
That's not.
Well, they are going to drive. They're going to drive a car on marijuana and hit somebody, which is
That's not true.
And,
I mean, but you would never say that. You would never say that alcohol
I-
should be illegal, right?
No, but I think alcohol has to be regulated like anything else. It'd be 21.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I don't. I definitely. But I mean, I don't think the solution is to have more people on drugs. I think the solution is there are some. I mean, I guess marijuana to sense being legal, but we're making it like it's a great thing, and people are really being hurt. And you see some of the good stories, but people get really hurt on this medicine. I mean, I know people that I know people that went to hospitals, and smoking anything other than the air is definitely not good for you. I wouldn't ban cigarettes because it's legal too, but let's not make it like the great thing that came around in this country that marijuana is legal. It's maybe we had to do it because too many people are doing it, but let's not make it just like alcohol is not great. Alcohol in moderation is fine. And some people shouldn't be taking alcohol.
Actually, I just to stay on this point though. I mean, there is actually so most of the data that has been shown to like the negative effects of marijuana has been widely discredited. Like it's almost all been disproven over the years. Now there's a lot of science that it shows that it can actually help with different mental health problems. It can help with depression and certain interests. There's a new study that came out recently that psilocybin mushrooms can help people with PTSD. There are actually uses like on a medicinal aspect. There are actually medicinal uses, and that's why medicinal marijuana became legal in many places before recreational did. But no, and like I said, when you talk about things like psychosis, the data is like, if we were to even grant that, which frankly, I don't think we should, but if we were to grant that, the data is very, very shaky on the actual causal links between those things. There's a lot of misinformation that's been spread on marijuana specifically over the years. And so I think that's worth noting.
It's fine. But the idea about, again, we can go and I'm doing that. I put that one out first because that's the quote that it make it almost promoting it as being the cure for things, which is, I think, is very, very sad, because I think that a lot of people that get hurt on it feel like any drug, and that we should really regulate it, and people should be well educated on both sides about it before they take a test, understand the fact, the good and the bad, and then if they want to take quote marijuana, that's fine. But everyone should know all the facts before they do it, instead of being advertised like you'd be on with the liquor, even when they're in school, when people promote it with like liquor is the greatest thing in the world. It's not the greatest thing in the world either, like you said. People should understand it and have maybe even get a license. There's where government can make some money on it. They get a license, they can use this stuff, They know all about it. They're educated, good and the bad. They know where to go to get help if they get addicted to it. And there are places that people do get addicted to marijuana. I know people that do. There are marijuana addiction centers. So some people it's okay, and some people it's good, not bad for it, but some people it is harmful, and they need to be educated before they do any of this stuff. That's on that level. And I started with marijuana because of all the drugs. It is the one that's quote considered the most harmless. Heroin, I have some people that I know that passed away on it. So I don't think it's, and it might be some because it's illegal, but heroin definitely can kill people. That's why I would never want to see that legalized in any form in any way in this country. And then you go even stronger with the the other illegal drugs we just talked about, fentanyl, which is really, that's like 100 times. I think it's 100 times more harmful than heroin, if I'm right about that. So, and so forth. So, but anyway, but the point of the matter is that the reason why you could legalize drugs, but the reason people take illegal drugs is because they want to be daring, they want to escape, they want to be the ones that do something wild and crazy. They want to be, so you can legalize these drugs, but illegal drugs are always going to be here because there's always going to be that want to do something a little bit more, to be more extreme. The board is it's never going to stop totally. I just want to tell you
that could exist, but I think that's why I said we should decriminalize all drugs, and I think we should legalize certain drugs. There is a difference between decriminalizing and legalizing, but then from there, that's just if you want to deal with the war on drugs and you want to stop with the cartels. You also brought up like human trafficking. I think human trafficking is a really bad argument in terms of like why we should stop immigration, because
illegal, not legal. Yeah. I love illegal. I love legal immigration. Illegal immigration.
Sure. I mean, you referenced Trump before. Trump was very hard on legal immigrants as well. So I think that's worth
fine.
Maybe. Yeah. All right. But so that's why I forgot to make that distinction. But sure, when you talk about undocumented immigration,
right.
But that's the problem though, is that if you say, okay, human trafficking is an issue, well, shutting off undocumented immigration doesn't stop the human trafficking. We're just saying that we don't want it done here anymore. It can happen over there. We just don't care about it here. This would be like saying if human trafficking was a problem between California and Nevada, we wouldn't say stop travel between California and Nevada. We would say, let's address the root causes here. Let's address the root problem. I feel the same way about human trafficking across the southern border. Let's address the root causes of this, not just say, oh, let's just stop the flow of people and let it happen on the other side of the border.
Well, so I would say that you don't want to expand this horrible, disgusting thing what people do to young people.
No, exactly. So we should address the root causes.
By now allowing these type of people in the country that do this type of thing, that sort of helps. They're not expanding it into new market.
You're not allowing it. You're not allowing it. But that's why I want to get to that'll be the fourth point, because you brought up four things. The third thing you brought up is COVID. And so there's a couple angles of this. One, if someone comes into this country and they get a job at one of the businesses that is subject to the mandate, they are still subject to the mandates. It's not like this only applies to citizens. These apply to people that work at these businesses. But also, I mean, yeah, if you want people to be vaccinated, then we should make it a lot easier to come into this country, and then people won't come undocumented, and then we can give them vaccines. A lot of these people are coming from countries where they have a tremendous shortage of vaccines. So for example, Haiti, there are a lot of people that are trying to come here from Haiti. Very, very difficult to get vaccinated in Haiti. So I feel like that's an undue burden to place on these people to say, well, to come here, you have to be vaccinated, but also like, we're going to restrict vaccines going to Haiti. And so like, I think that, yeah, we should allow these people into this country and then help them get vaccinated, help them have access to these.
If they can come in legally in the country, they would have to be legally vaccinated to come in the country. Again,
exactly.
Illegal, then the border should be closed and only legal. If you want to increase the amount of legal immigrants in this country, that's fine with me. If we can keep, but no, the biggest problem is I don't want to see the people who are on the lower end not be able to move up the ladder, because people who come in the country, because we keep increasing the immigrants, they will not have the chance, because again, supply and demand, basic business concept. If you have an ample supply of new workers at a lower end, it's going to make sure the wages of those who have been here stay down. And so
I want to address the kind of the point that you're making. So I think that a vaccine requirement is fine for illegal immigrants, but I think there should be a stipulation. If you are coming from a country where there's a tremendous shortage of vaccines, you can come and you'll just get vaccinated as soon as you come. So for example, Haiti.
That's fine. Again, legal. Yeah. Legally, of course.
But that's the thing, though. I'm sure you recognize, though, that our legal immigration system is broken. I mean, there are people that wait 20 years to come to this country. There are people that it costs insane amounts of money. It doesn't, like, our system doesn't work. If we made it,
I'm more than happy to make it easy if we need to.
Well, that's good.
That's fine.
Good,
but I'm going to close the door first until that, because again,
no.
Unless Carl, let me ask you one thing. Okay, you like everybody coming to your country. Why? I know. Why don't you just
I've,
open the
I've
door?
got,
Why don't you
I've
open the
got to
door
be
and let everybody walk to the house?
you've got to let me finish a point on
Okay,
this. You can't
sorry.
keep injecting during these points. So no, the point is that nobody is advocating. There's not a single member of Congress that is saying just have undocumented immigrants. No, there's not a single member of Congress saying that we should have open borders or anything like that. What is being advocated though is to make it easier for people to come here, make it easier for people to claim asylum, for example. Because right now, the asylum process, there are a lot of people that want to come and claim asylum, but the problem is that they know they'll be kept in horrid conditions. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the detention centers that people are kept in when they come and claim asylum.
Yeah, they had that in Obama's
And
administration.
Obama, and then they also escalated. I thought you didn't want to get partisan with it, but if you want to get partisan with it, you can talk about the family separations that happened under Donald Trump. And there were people that, well, no. I think, I mean, if you want to address it, we can address it. Under Donald Trump, there were at least 60 families that came through legal ports of entry. This is legal. They did everything by the book. They did it as legal. They were ripped apart from their families, and some of the people, they were never even reunited with their parents. So, I mean, to get partisan with it, I think that's a little silly. It's a problem, and I think we should address it. And so, yes, these are horrid conditions. And if we don't address those situations, people will try to avoid those and come undocumented. So we need to make it easier to come here. And then we should, from there, you'll have less people coming undocumented. But the answer isn't this, when you say like close it off, I don't even know how you recommend that we do that, because the majority of people that are here that are undocumented are overstayed visas. And so you're not going to, if you could build the biggest wall you want, that's not going to address the majority of undocumented immigrants in this country.
I'm more concerned about more people coming in. The people here will worry about that situation, but we got to stop the flow of people that are coming here illegally.
No, but I mean, this is the flow though. The flow is the majority of people that are here undocumented are overstayed visas, and this is going to continue to be the trend.
Well, let's make sure that then we agree on putting the wall up so we can finish
We don't agree on the wall, because the wall doesn't address the problem though. No, it's in a giant waste of I thought we were talking about we don't like government waste before. That's a gigantic waste of resources.
Well, I think that, like, again, I don't want to, I'm not as big a fan of Biden, so it's fair to say that. He wants to put a wall around his place, and we're paying for in Delaware. He must feel that walls do something good. We're paying for that wall to protect his nice house, so people don't come in. Then walls must, and we put a big wall around Congress so that people can't come to Congress. They can't even represent anymore. We must feel walls do something good. It's
I don't like Biden, or I don't like a lot of the people in Congress.
No, so I'm just curious.
That's not really a convincing argument for me.
Now, I have to ask you a very serious question. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's the best show on Netflix?
Best show on Netflix? I actually just started this show. It's called Peaky Blinders. It's really fun. I like it.
You just started it?
I just started it. Have you seen it? Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it for me.
Everybody dies at the end.
Oh, why?
Sorry,
no,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Amazing. Peaky Blinders is amazing. We may not agree on a lot, but that is one. Oh, I have another show I'm watching now, by the way.
What is it? What's your favorite?
Oh no, Peaky Blinders is in the top. I mean,
is it okay? No, it's. I'm really glad I found it.
I mean, it's just a great artistic thing, and that's another thing. It's just like the whole industry, which is a great thing to see more art be able to come out, because the new streaming services competing against each other, different services competing, instead of used to be ABC, NBC, CBS, and that's it when I was growing up. And you got to either watch those 3 channels and that was it. Now with competition and new businesses coming along, we're going to be able to watch a whole lot of new stuff and hear different points of view. And that's a great thing. And I'd like to leave on a note of that, is that I think it's really good speaking to you. And I think we've basically stayed civilized. It shows that we can do this in this country. We can have a conversation. Maybe we could even learn from each other a little bit. Maybe it's something we could do a little bit more. They don't do the name calling. We'll learn a little bit more. Maybe we'll think a little differently. What do you think of that?
It was a great conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for having. And then, God bless, all the best with you, and keep speaking your mind.
Yeah, you as well. Hopefully we talk again in the future someday.
Sounds
you have a great
great.
night.
You too. Thank you. Take care.